That's good. You know, we're recording this tonight, right? Good, because we're going to make a tape of this. If you have trouble falling asleep, we can sell it to you, and you'll be out like that. Obviously, my name is Joe Bastardi. I'm not as handsome looking there as Joe Bast is, but then again, I have extra letters in my name. Now, the title of this speech, you notice me looking off here because once again, I forgot, here it is. The title of the speech is, this always happens, by the way. This is always rehearsed. I can't find what I'm supposed to do at the beginning. Someone tells me, hey, there it is. When the truth is found to be lies. Now that shows you how hip I am. That's right from what? The Jefferson airplane, who became the Jefferson Starship. But what I'm going to do tonight is this. The folks that don't believe what we're saying, I'm not going to ask you to believe me. I'm going to ask you to go look yourself, okay? And you're going to find that when I try to tie this all together, there may be some things that are beyond the obvious that we're going to present up here. I think there is a lot of disagreement in what's going on, and I've loved the weather since I was 3 years old. In fact, I tell my wife a lot of times, you never have to worry. I already have a mistress, it's the weather. Next to my mom and dad, I've loved the weather. Besides, you have to worry about it with this face anyway. But the fact of the matter is that I've loved the weather since I was a little kid. My dad's a meteorologist, and my father taught me from the get-go that's not get-go, that's get-go, okay? That you have to stand on the foundation of the past to reach for the future. So I've wanted to do this, and my dad, like I said before, my dad's a meteorologist. Now, what's interesting is there was a period of my life when you guys were landing on the moon, right? You were landing on the moon. I said, I want to be an astronaut. I had a great idea. I was going to build a restaurant on the moon. Then I found out, great food, no atmosphere. Try the veal. I'm here till Wednesday. Okay, we're in Las Vegas, Elvis. This is where the king lives, right? Elvis Presley, right? But I think the king being alive still has more validity than many AGW ideas. Now, it's weird to me that entertainers and rock and roll people who believe in all this freedom and wild stuff, that they're like, you know, they're all supporting the whole global warming thing, which is very, very confining. I mean, you're shutting down freedom and things like that. And I said, like, for instance, I don't know much about the king, but I know about the boss because I grew up in New Jersey, Bruce Springsteen. And I'm just wondering, he made all that money with all those gas-guzzling cars in his song. Like, for instance, Thunder Road, So Mary Climb In, it's a town full of losers, we're pulling out of here to win. He'd have to change it so, Mary, don't fare, my smart car gets 72 miles a gallon, we're not going to pollute the air. Or, you know, the one part, what is it, Jungle Land? Meet me at that giant Exxon sign that gives this city light. Well, guess what? You want Exxon out of business, and the EPA is making it so we won't have electricity for light. So, and the river. Remember the song The River? The guy loses his job. I got a job working construction at Johnstown Company. Lately, no work because of the economy. That was written in 1980. Well, after 4 years of Jimmy Carter, I could understand why that was true in that particular song. So we have all these things going on here where you see people that are trying to save the planet and they don't even know what they're doing or understanding it. Now, I have something called a Triple Crown of Climate. I put this on O'Reilly years ago. And basically, it's a simple equation. The sun's the ocean's stochastic event, rule the climate, not CO2. It's an easy equation. The sun plus the ocean plus these stochastic events. That's how I always your body's like a computer. Did you know that? That you reboot it by doing stuff like that. I was taught that by my wife, so I figured it had to be right. Everything else she says is right. Blows away CO2, so its effect cannot accurately be determined in the noise. And running to natural variability is admitting you were wrong. Oh, it's natural variability. Well, you know, natural variability ourselves into an ice age. How about that, right? In fact, we've had ice ages at 7,000 parts per million. So all these things cast doubt on this. And look, here's the biggest thing. For people who don't believe what we're saying, at the very least, you're going to see examples of doubt, all right? I believe they're examples of outright refutation of the whole theory. But the very least you could do is don't believe me, go look for yourself. Now, this should say it all. This is from Dr. Vincent Gray, but I have around another 20 minutes or so. Basically, does anybody see any linkage between CO2 and the global temperature in the geological history? Is there anybody out there that sees it? I guess someone could design some equation or some logarithm, but it appears to me that neither one of them are linked to the other. So how do we know now that CO2 is responsible for whatever warming there is? Now, I'm a Penn State grad. When I graduated out of Penn State, we led the country in meteorologists graduated. We graduated 2/3 of the world's meteorologists. This was back in 1978. Now, I realize I'm dating myself, but until I met my wife, no one else would date me. But the fact of the matter is, I also wrestled in college at Penn State, all right? In fact, I'm the only wrestler ever to have degreed in meteorology, okay, NCAA. That shows you if you confine yourself to a small enough square, you could be number one. Obviously, right now, the face of Penn State meteorology is Dr. Michael Mann. And it's very, I'm a persona non grata up there, by the way, up in the, Penn State. I don't think they like me. I never knew what persona non grata was. I thought it was an Italian dish, right? I went to a restaurant about 10 years ago, I'll never forget it. A waitress comes and says, "What would you like?" I said, "Well, I'd like persona non grata." She looks at me, turns around, walks away. Two guys, Vito and Nunzio, come along, throw me out in the street and says, "That's persona non grata." So I realize what that is now. And I did wrestle there. I wasn't a real good wrestler. I was 1-4, but I was unbeaten at 167. I had to go up and wrestle a bunch of heavyweights because I couldn't break in the lineup. So people call me names about global warming. When you're wrestling a guy who weighs 305 pounds and you weigh 167, you know that you don't get nervous for normal things. But my wrestling coach, I'll never forget him saying to me, asking me if I played basketball. I said, "Yeah, coach, I played a little basketball." He says, "Well, you look like a basketball, the way you're getting bounced around on the mat." He was one of the first men on the beach in Normandy, by the way, a guy named Bill Cole. And then had a doctor tell me, I had a blood test. He says, "Well, your liver levels are high." And I says, "Is that something to worry about?" He goes, "No, it means you're not recovering and you probably shouldn't be wrestling at a college level." That was encouraging, but I really got the hint when I was sitting in the whirlpool and the trainer came in and threw in a clock radio. I knew that I wasn't one of the better guys on the team. Anyway, we do have Dr. Mann there. Now, since I was a jock, okay, wrestler, right? You know, they have this course, Geology. I believe John Kerry took it, right? I think he got a D, and it's called Rocks for Jocks, all right? So let's say I'm taking Climatology 101, okay? We'll call it Clouds for Clowns, okay? I'm going in there. I have a couple of questions because, and by the way, I put this PowerPoint together while the Stanley Cup was going on, so that's why I went to the hockey stick. I want to be very respectful because I am a Penn State grad. But here I am, Climate 101, Clouds for Clowns, okay? So my question is this. There's the hockey stick. How come you're allowed to take 950 years of tree rings, and then when they go the other way, how come you're just allowed to say, "Okay, that doesn't count anymore, I'm switching to something else"? I didn't know that that was allowed. Now, here's what's interesting about this. The fact that those tree rings are going the other way means it casts doubt on the rest of the entire hockey stick. That's the thing. Now, for me as a meteorologist, okay, what I do is I constantly look at the weather across the entire globe, and you constantly realize that the weather reacts to everything. So when someone tells me that the medieval warm period was local, I said, well, you have to tell me where it was cold. Because if you're saying that there's no change in the temperature anywhere, all right, and you have a warm area, where's it cold? How can you just get away with that? Now, Chinese meteorologist Liu and other people did a study. Now look at Liu's representation with his tree rings. You can see the up and down of the medieval warm period, and you could also see that his tree ring study is detecting the current warming that is going on. So why isn't Liu's study as valuable or more valuable? Why isn't that the correct study? Because if the medieval warm period was local, where's the compensating cool? If the tree rings go opposite of a known, how can they be trusted in the other places? These are just simple, basic questions from, again, a jock, just asking the question. If it's pollution, why is Lou's study showing it? And isn't Lou's study, which agrees with the warming now, which showed the previous warming, which would debunk the whole hockey stick, why is that not what we are looking at? Why don't we ever hear about that, right? So these are just some questions I would ask. Now, I'm not getting a chance to ask those questions. In fact, nobody's getting a chance to ask those questions. Now, Inconvenient Truth. Remember that movie? What a great movie, huh? I liked it, but I liked The Wizard of Oz, too, and other fantasy movies. But maybe, Al Gore, maybe I should start, you want me to do, Al Gore, I'd have to start swearing all over the place. I get videos of it, I go, how the heck, does he swear like that? But look at the ACE index plummeting here. See that? You guys, can you see this? See how it's going down since 2005? Why is it doing that? Because the Pacific has begun to cool. You see that? MEI stands for me. No, it stands for multivariate ENSO index. It's basically fancy terminology for what the El Nino in the tropical Pacific is up to. And you can see plainly the ups and downs that are going on. We've started cooling the Pacific. It flipped into its cool, what we call Pacific Decadal Oscillation, so that the El Ninos that they were counting on to continue to pump the global temperature are not going to occur as frequently, and they're not going to be as strong. So now look what's happened over the tropics. When the MEI and the PDO were predominantly warm, it was very moist in the tropics. You see the blue and the purple there. This is what we call the mixing ratio, specific gravity, specific humidity, okay? You can see it very moist. Now look what has happened since then. Since the PDO flip, the MEI is negative and the mixing ratios have fallen, and that's why, you see these hurricanes and tropical cyclones, they look like beasts on TV, but if it's dry in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, they have to work like dogs to develop. So what happened is, as soon as the tropical Pacific began its drop in temperature, guess what happens? It dries out over the top. Now, Al Gore, former Vice President Gore, wants us to spend cajillion dollars on CO2 and cap and trade and all this. I heard a simple solution when I was a kid on how to stop hurricanes. Instead of capping and trading and ruin the economy, just change the name to Himicanes. Then none of them get past the Virgin Islands. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I can't help it, Mama. I got to move around when I do the weather. Since the PDO flip, Arctic summers have been cooling. The global sea ice is rising. Southern Hemisphere has broken its all-time record. I'm very worried about that Southern Hemisphere because there are a lot of emperor penguins down there, and I know they're waiting for the chance to invade South America and within 1,000 years. So, now, wasn't the Arctic ice caps a global issue? Remember, the ice caps are melting, right? Well, look what we've got here. Since the Pacific Decadal Oscillation flipped in 2007, you see how it was going down there? Now it's coming up. You see what we're above normal globally. And aren't there two poles? If we're going to think globally, why aren't we looking at the Southern Hemisphere, which is crushing records? Now, I just heard the other day that's because of global warming, too. Seriously, it's an increase in ice due to it getting warmer. It makes you ask the question, well, what answer don't you own? Wouldn't you like to take a test where no matter what you put down, I feel that's the right answer. That's it right there. I know I'd like to have weather forecasts, okay? Hey, you said it was going to be a foot of snow. We've got an inch of rain. Well, natural variability, right? It's funny. The difference between meteorologists and climatologists, I don't mean it to be, let's say Roy and I are in an argument over what the weather's going to be in a week. Eventually, the weather comes along and it's the judge. With climatologists, they argue about stuff 100 years from now, and no matter what happens, they're always right. Like I said, well, you're both, so you're a level above everybody. Now, okay, I got a little serious here. This really aggravates me. The EPA's 3 lines of evidence are demonstratively false. There are no trapping hotspots in the tropics. As a matter of fact, with the mean relative humidities beginning to fall, the specific humidity, the wet bulbs have fallen in the tropics over top of these areas where there's supposed to be these trapping hotspots where everything's going to feed back and the world's going to blow up. No catastrophic rise in global temperatures. And the most laughable is to actually use a computer model to base policy on. As someone who has to deal with models every day, look, when I was a little kid, right, 14, 15 years old, everybody waited for Sports Illustrated and their swimsuit model. I would wait for the WeatherWise magazine because it would have pictures of hurricanes and, oh, take a look at the eye on Betsy over there, or Alma, And now models, my models are all computer models anyway. Now this is unbelievable. Read what this says down here. I'll read it to prove that I can read. Moreover, due to the time lapse inherent in the Earth's climate, the Climate Stabilization Targets Assessment says that the full warming from any concentration of CO2 will not be realized for several centuries. Now, look at that chart up there, and how do you make that statement given the variability of CO2 and temperatures, which is obviously not linked in the first place? I was looking at that, are you kidding me? And the fact that you would actually say, well, several centuries from now, it's going to be 2°C warmer. Well, how about all these people starving today because you're shutting down hopes and dreams because of choking off the economic lifeline of this country by these draconian laws? I need a recording of that because I can't believe I put that many syllables together and it made sense. The trapping hotspots in the tropics, they're not occurring. No significant temperature trend in the tropics. Now, why am I so big on the tropics? Because I want a vacation in Tahiti. No, the reason I am is when I was a little boy, okay, it's born into you, the whole thing. And my dad loved hurricanes, and my dad used to always say, the tropics rule everything, that the energy from the tropics get into the westerlies in the atmosphere and push everything around. When I was a kid, I didn't get put to bed with the 3 little bears. I got put to bed with the 1954 hurricanes, Hazel, Carol, and Edna. Once upon a time, there was a tropical wave moving across the Atlantic, right? So as I've gotten older, and it makes sense that the tropical oceans are the great thermostat of the Earth. The Nino 3-4, that's the Central Pacific part of the tropics, is no warmer. There's nothing warming up. You can't go anywhere unless you are actually warming those areas. And remember, there were supposed to be trapping hotspots over these areas. There's none to be found. Now, here's what's interesting. For the first time since 1996, computer modeling is trying to forecast a positive Arctic sea ice extent, and that's because the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation is also beginning to flip. It won't flip completely till about 2020, as Dr. William Gray, who pegged this whole thing back in the 70s. When everybody was yelling ice age, including the president's science advisor, Dr. Gray would say, no. We're going into warmer cycles because of the ocean. And by the way, his paper, it's a must-read. 2012, he presented that paper. It's not quite one of my gospels, but it's in there as one of my books there. It's the Meridional Overturning Circulation and the Physical Flaws of the Global Warming Theory. The guy had it pegged from the get-go. But as the Atlantic begins to cool, it's my theory, I'm going to present this Wednesday, that the Western Atlantic, the warm water is trapped in there. You're in the 1950s right now. But we're seeing the Northern Atlantic begin to cool now. We're getting colder water in the North Atlantic. So this is interesting, but the Arctic sea ice is not melting as fast as it has been in previous summers, may go above normal. As far as the heat, the catastrophic increase in heat, the 30s by far the most extreme decade, both for warm and cold. And I don't know what CO2 was then. It was like 220 parts per million or 320. Now, here's my shower room theory for global warming. Shower room theory for global warming. You go into your bathroom. You turn on the light. Then you go turn on the shower. Come back 5 minutes later. The bathroom is a lot warmer if you turn it on hotter, right? Is that because you turned on the light, or is it because you turned on the shower? My point is, if the tropical oceans are going through a warm cycle, guess what's going to happen to the global temperature overall? It's going to rise. Now the big test is here. They're flipping around, going into their cool cycle, so let's see where it is. And this is where Roy comes in, because he's the big satellite guy. We've got till about 2030 to see what the objective measurement of temperatures do. We didn't start measuring the temperatures with satellites till 78, so everybody's adjusting temperatures up and down all over the place in the pre-satellite era, but now we can measure it, and it's just like a big test. And the downward turn is starting. There you can see CO2 continuing up, and here's the NCEP CFSR2 reanalysis of the temperatures over the last 10 years since the PDO flip. Now, NCEP is not the Cato Institute. NCEP stands for National Centers Environmental Prediction, hardly a right-wing think tank, right? So we can see objectively the temperatures, and those little spikes you see there, folks, those are the El Niños. The temperature spikes, and you notice it's falling more because the entire global pattern is beginning to change. Now, as far as the models go, this is Dr. Christie's, off Dr. Christie's representation. Are you kidding me? You're basing policy on this? And then Dr. Spencer's right here. You're basing policy on models that show the temperature going through the roof, and there's no real response that way at all? So it's easily proven false. I don't understand how they got this far, how this hasn't been brought up. Now, the PDO and the MEI, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, Multivariate ENSO Index, control the U.S. growing season precipitation, not CO2. When the PDO and the MEI are cool, guess what? There's less water vapor available downstream over the United States, so it dries out. That's what we went through in the 50s, especially. When the PDO warmed, guess what happened? More moisture available, it rains, but the global temperature went up during that time, again, because you warmed the ocean. Now, this is exactly opposite of what the president said to those folks in Texas. He says that global warming was causing their drought when the global temperature has been coming down because of the flip in the Pacific. Now look at the PDO. It's closely related to the MEI. When the PDO is warm, the Earth warms. When it gets cool, the Earth cools. Back and forth. We're just starting the next cycle, so the test is there. And I drew red lines here so you can see what happens. The temperature comes down. It spikes with the weaker El Niños that we're having now, continues to come down, and then you see where the temperatures are going. We're going to spike with this El Niño and then follow it down again. So the President of the United States, with all due respect, I don't think he's getting the right advice from his advisors. Because, no, he actually, listen, he actually needs someone to say, look, don't walk into this trap. Because when it's easily shown, you know, when these guys say something, it takes me 5 minutes to refute it. I could, like, you know, Sheldon Whitehouse in Rhode Island. This is the worst hurricanes have ever been. The reason we have a radar fence is because Rhode Island Senator T.F. Green in 1961 got sick and tired of hurricanes running the eastern seaboard and Providence getting slammed. They were underwater in 54, underwater in 38. Donna was a bad storm, gave hurricane-force winds to every state on the East Coast from Florida to Maine. It was bad during that time. We haven't seen anything yet. I fear we're in that same kind of period now. But the El Nino, these guys start screaming Super Nino. Now, we started taking this apart, my partner Joe DeLeo and I, back in April. The physical drivers are not there for the Super Nino. And what's amazing about them wanting to see a Super Nino is because it will spike the temperature, of the global temperature. And that's an admission, this is how illogical it is, that is an admission that it is the antics of the tropical Pacific, not CO2, that's causing the global temperatures to go up and down. But do you see, Tom Harris is going to give a talk on that tomorrow, how illogical some of the arguments are about all this. So they're rooting a Super Nino on to spike the temperature. You're making my point for me, right? That it is natural variability, that it is nature. So where are we? The hockey stick appears to be broken again. You know, I'm a dumb jock, so what do I know? Global ace, it's in the hole. by the way, that's going to start coming up again. The EPA lines of evidence are demonstratively and provably false. They're right in front of you. Even if you don't agree with me, go look at all those lines of evidence they have and go ask yourself, well, where is it? All right? The precipitation ideas of the AGW ilk are nonsense. Okay? The reason why it gets wet in the central part of the United States is when the Pacific's in a warming cycle. We're having a spike in the warming now. You notice it's raining a lot in the central part of the United States again. The global temperatures begin to reverse, and even the Arctic ice extent is heading above normal. Elvis, though, might be alive. That has a better chance, I believe. Tornadoes are down. Wildfires. You know what's amazing? Every time a tornado shows up on TV, it's like, this is a sign of this. Wildfire. Do you know this year we are 50% burned acreage of the record lowest year? We are 1/3 of normal right now in wildfires. Yet a wildfire shows up, you had the wildfires in San Diego, right? I think it destroyed 80 houses, 90 houses. They had a wildfire back in October 2007, I believe, took out 1,500 houses. And yet it's right on the news and everything else. So it's obvious that these folks are either not looking or they're in the tank. In the Wednesday panel, I'm going to talk about what goes around comes around. We're going to show a novel link to the end game of the warm AMO, the increased lurking in the Arctic ice, and the East Coast hurricane threat, and a demonstration of how we nailed this winter. We had a brutal winter. People look at, what the heck are you guys looking at? Well, we'll show you. We were looking at 1917-18 because we do believe in looking at the weather that happened before. Now, I want to say something here. You know, we're right about this, all right? And you got to ask yourself what the real truth is. It takes faith to fight, but you must fight to have faith. Understand, it just doesn't come to you. And the only way to increase that faith is to search and find the truth, and you pursue the truth no matter what it leads. The kind of truth that I'm talking about is that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. If you are going to shut down the very lifeline of the economy over nothing, or over something that isn't there, then you are violating that truth, all right? So that's why I feel kind of strongly about this whole matter. I also have a tough time when I hear something and then, are you kidding me? Have you not looked at what happened? Can anybody explain to me how 13.5 feet of water got into Providence, Rhode Island, September 21st, 1938, with wind gusts to 186 miles an hour at Blue Hill, Massachusetts, and 2 billion board feet of trees blown down in the 38 hurricane? Or 1944, 600-mile wide diameter of hurricane-force winds off the eastern seaboard with a 44 hurricane, all right? Have we seen anything like that lately? Do you realize 50% of the screws in the plane that went in to find that 44 hurricane were stripped when they came back, right? So when people tell me things are worse now, I say, you can't be looking at what happened before. And the problem is most people don't have the chance to do that. But I'll tell you what, if they don't start looking, they're going to realize that no matter what happens with the other issues today, we were one plant last year away from having rolling blackouts, all right, with that cold wave. And we think the winter this year will be like 09, 10, 02, 03. You're going to find out real quick what not paying attention, I'm talking to people who don't necessarily see things my way, where you're going to be with that, because once you're trapped, you're trapped. Finally, if the moon is actually made of cheese, okay, for the AGW crowd, it looks like it's Swiss because the argument looks like it's full of holes to me. Now, as for me, because I'm on a low-carb diet, I'm hoping it's provolone because there aren't any carbohydrates in it. Thank you very much for your time.